Claire sat on the edge of her small bed, still wearing her work apron. The smell of baked bread and sugar clung to her clothes, but she barely noticed. Her brother Ethan's words kept repeating in her mind like a song she couldn't stop hearing. He had said it so casually, as if it didn't matter at all. "Stop pretending to be successful, Claire. You're only fooling yourself." She had smiled at him then, pretending his words didn't hurt. But now that the house was quiet, and the lights were dim, those words felt heavy inside her chest. She had worked so hard to make her little bakery stay open. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, mixing dough and preparing pastries, hoping that maybe today would be better than yesterday. Yet to Ethan, all of it was just pretending. Claire wasn't angry with him. Maybe he didn't mean to be cruel. Maybe he just didn't understand what it meant to build something from nothing. Ethan had always been the successful one, a stable job, a car, a nice apartment in the city. Their parents always talked about how proud they were of him. Claire was the dreamer, the one who left her office job to chase something uncertain. She could still remember the day she told Ethan about her plan. He had looked at her like she was a child, playing grown-up games. "Baking isn't a business," he had said. "It's a hobby." But Claire had gone ahead anyway. She rented a tiny corner shop on Maple Street, painted the walls soft yellow, and called it Claire's Corner Bakery. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Every loaf of bread that came out of the oven felt like a small victory. Every smile from a customer felt like proof that she wasn't pretending. She was living her dream, just not the kind of dream Ethan respected. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept seeing his face, the half smile, the shake of his head. She thought about how easy it was for him to judge. He didn't see the long hours, the flour-covered hands, the nights she stayed up balancing bills she barely understood. He didn't know how lonely it felt to chase something when no one believed in you. The next morning, the alarm went off at 4. Claire got up, even though her eyes were still tired. She went to the kitchen, tied her hair back, and began her routine. Kneading the dough always helped her think. The warmth, the smell of yeast, it reminded her of why she started. There was peace in it. Every push of her hand said, "I'm still here. I'm still trying." As she placed the bread in the oven, she looked around the small shop. The paint was peeling near the windows. The display counter had a small crack she'd been meaning to fix. But the place felt alive. The shelves were filled with small things she'd made herself, muffins, cookies, and a sign near the counter that read, "Made with love, not machines." By 7 o'clock, the first customer came in, Mrs. Kelly, an old woman who lived nearby. She always ordered the same thing, a slice of banana bread and a cup of tea. "Your hands make magic, dear," she said every morning, and Claire smiled, grateful for the kindness. Then came the children from the school across the street, dropping coins on the counter for chocolate chip cookies. Claire loved those small moments. They made her feel like she mattered, even if the rest of the world didn't see it. Still, Ethan's voice stayed in her mind. Pretending to be successful. Maybe he was right. Success didn't look like this, waking up tired, counting pennies, fixing things that broke every week. Real success was supposed to be shiny and effortless. Maybe she had been fooling herself. Later that evening, she closed the shop and sat on the sidewalk outside. The street was quiet, the air smelled like rain, and her hands were sore from work. She looked at the bakery sign glowing softly above her head. For a moment, she imagined what it would feel like if it all disappeared, if she just gave up, sold the shop, and got a regular job again. The thought made her chest tighten. But then, a young girl walked by with her mother, holding one of Claire's cupcakes. The girl took a bite and smiled so wide it lit up her face. Her mother laughed and said, "See? Told you it was worth the walk." Claire watched them go, and something inside her softened. Maybe this was success. Not the kind Ethan measured, but the kind that warmed hearts and filled small corners of the world with sweetness. When she got home, she didn't open her phone or check her messages. She sat by the window, looking out at the empty street, and whispered quietly to herself. "I'm not pretending." The words were soft, but they felt strong. She didn't need to prove anything to Ethan or anyone else. She just needed to keep going, one loaf at a time. She turned off the light and lay in bed. The hurt was still there, but so was the fire. And deep down, she knew, one day, life would speak for her. One day, Ethan would see that what he called pretending was actually persistence. And that would be enough. The next few weeks were hard for Claire. The bakery was quiet most mornings, and she tried not to count how many pastries went unsold. She kept her smile ready for every customer who came through the door, but deep down she felt the worry growing heavier each day. The bills were waiting on the counter at home, and the numbers never seemed to go down. Sometimes, while cleaning the counter, she would think about Ethan again. His words would echo in her head. Pretending to be successful. She tried to brush them off, but they stuck like glue. Every time the shop was empty, every time a batch of bread didn't rise right, she would hear his voice in her mind. Still, she couldn't stop working. She refused to. There was something about the smell of baking bread that gave her peace. It made her feel alive in a way her old office job never did. Back then, she had sat under bright lights, typing reports she didn't care about, pretending to smile when her boss told her she was lucky to have a stable job. That wasn't living, it was surviving. This bakery, even with its struggles, was her real life. Every morning she started before dawn. She would mix the dough while the town was still sleeping. Her hands moved quickly and surely, like they knew what to do even when her heart felt uncertain. The radio played softly in the background, old songs that filled the silence. Sometimes she would hum along, pretending the empty shop was full of people waiting for her bread. Around 7, her first few regular customers would arrive. Mrs. Kelly would come in with her scarf tied neatly and her same gentle smile. Then a young man from the bookstore across the street would stop by for a coffee and muffin before opening his shop. Claire always made sure his coffee was hot and ready on time. These small routines made her feel like part of something, like she still belonged in this little town. One day, when she was wiping the counter, she saw a small crack in the glass display case. She sighed. It was just one more thing that needed fixing. She checked the register and knew she couldn't afford to replace it yet. She covered it carefully with a cloth and told herself it could wait another week. That night, she went home late. Her small apartment above the bakery smelled faintly of sugar and flour. She sat by the window, her tired feet resting on a stool, and stared at the quiet street below. The shop sign glowed faintly in the dark. It wasn't bright or fancy, but it was hers. She whispered softly, just one more month. Please, let things get better. But things didn't get better, not right away. A storm hit the town 2 days later, and most people stayed home. Her shop stayed open, but hardly anyone came in. The rain leaked through the side window, and the floor near the counter got wet. Claire mopped it again and again, trying to keep busy. When the storm finally ended, she checked the mailbox and found another letter, another bill. She placed it on the kitchen table without opening it. She didn't have the strength that night. Instead, she made herself a cup of tea and sat in silence. The sound of the ticking clock felt louder than usual. Later that week, Ethan called. She looked at his name on the phone screen and hesitated before answering. His voice was calm, polite, but there was that tone again, the one that made her feel small. "How's the bakery going?" he asked. "It's going," she said softly. "That's good. You know, if you ever need a real job, my company is hiring. You're good with people, Claire. You'd do well here." She smiled even though he couldn't see her. "Thanks, Ethan. But I'm not ready to give up yet." He sighed. "I just don't want to see you struggle for something that isn't working." She wanted to tell him that the struggle was part of it. That she was learning something bigger than money, something about herself. But she didn't. She just said goodnight and hung up. When she went to bed, she stared at the ceiling for a long time. The doubt crept in again. What if he was right? What if she really was chasing something that would never happen? But then she remembered the faces of her customers, the laughter of the children, the kind words from Mrs. Kelly, the smell of fresh bread filling the shop. That was real. That was hers. The next morning, she got up earlier than usual. The sun was just rising, and a faint orange light filled the kitchen. She took a deep breath and started kneading the dough again. The sound of her hands pressing and folding echoed softly. It felt steady, like a heartbeat. She whispered to herself, one day at a time. By the time the bakery opened, she was already smiling again. She placed the fresh loaves on the shelves, dusted the counter, and unlocked the door. The smell of warm bread filled the air, and for a moment, she forgot about everything else. A little girl came in with her father, her small hands clutching a few coins. "Can I buy a cookie?" she asked shyly. Claire nodded and handed her 2 instead of 1. "Thank you," the girl said, her face lighting up. As they left, Claire stood by the window watching them walk away. She felt tired, but she also felt strong. Life wasn't easy, but she was still standing, still baking, still believing. And somewhere deep inside, she knew, even if no one else saw it yet, she wasn't pretending. She was becoming. The morning started with a silence that felt heavier than usual. Claire opened her eyes before the alarm rang, her body already tired from the night before. She had stayed up late counting her money, trying to make sense of how she could pay rent and still afford the supplies for next week. The numbers didn't look good. She sighed, rubbed her eyes, and told herself it would be fine, because it had to be. Downstairs, the bakery smelled of yesterday's pastries. She switched on the lights, put on her apron, and looked around. The walls had tiny cracks she hadn't noticed before. The coffee machine made a strange noise when she turned it on. It felt like everything was slowly breaking, piece by piece, just like her patience. Still, she worked. She kneaded dough, brushed egg wash on pastries, and tried to focus on the sound of the oven. But inside, a quiet fear was growing. What if this was it? What if she had reached her limit? Around noon, there were only a few customers. A young couple, a delivery driver, and Mrs. Kelly, faithful as always. Claire smiled and chatted, but when the doorbell stopped ringing, she sat behind the counter with her chin resting on her hands. The shop felt too quiet. The silence reminded her of her doubts. She looked at the "Open" sign hanging on the door. For a moment, she thought about turning it to a closed and walking away. Just for one day, she told herself. One day to rest, to think, to breathe. But she couldn't do it. She couldn't close the doors on something she had built with her own hands. That evening, as she was cleaning up, the oven made a loud clanging sound and stopped working. She froze. Her heart sank. She turned the dial again, but nothing happened. It was dead. She leaned against the counter and felt her eyes fill with tears. This oven had been with her since day one. Without it, she couldn't bake a single thing. She sat on the floor, her back against the counter, and finally let herself cry. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just quiet tears that rolled down her face and fell onto her apron. She whispered softly, "Please, not now." After a while, she stood up, wiped her face, and took a deep breath. She checked the repair cost on her phone. It was too much. She couldn't afford it, not this month. Maybe not even next. The next day, she tried to bake using a small backup oven she had for cupcakes, but it wasn't strong enough. The bread came out uneven, and the pastries were undercooked. A few customers complained politely, and she apologized with a tired smile. By evening, she was exhausted, both in body and heart. When she finally closed the shop that night, she walked home under the streetlights. The town felt cold and quiet. She saw her reflection in the bakery window, tired eyes, messy hair, flour on her face, and she barely recognized herself. Was this really the same woman who once dreamed of success? When she reached her apartment, her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. She almost ignored it but picked up anyway. "Hey, Claire," his voice came through, calm and familiar. "Just checking in. How's the shop?" She hesitated. It's fine, she said softly. Are you sure? You sound tired. I'm just working a lot, she said. He sighed. You know, you don't have to keep forcing it. Maybe this bakery thing isn't meant to be. There's no shame in letting go. His words hit harder than he probably intended. Claire felt a lump in her throat. She didn't know what to say, so she just said, "Thanks for caring," and hung up. Then she sat on the couch and stared at the wall. His voice kept repeating in her mind. Maybe it isn't meant to be. The next morning, she almost didn't open the shop. She stood at the door with the keys in her hand for a long time. Her fingers trembled slightly. But then she thought of Mrs. Kelly, of the little girl who loved her cookies, of the few people who smiled when they tasted her bread. That was enough. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The small oven was still weak, but she worked with it. She adjusted recipes, changed baking times, and found little tricks to make things work. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. That afternoon, a teenage boy came in, holding a handful of coins. He looked nervous. Do you still have any cupcakes left? He asked. Claire nodded and smiled. Just 2. He grinned. Perfect. My mom's birthday is today. She loves your cupcakes. He paid with his coins and hurried out. Claire stood there, watching him leave, feeling a warmth rise in her chest. Maybe things weren't perfect, but moments like that reminded her why she started. When the day ended, she sat by the window again, this time with a quiet sense of peace. The sky outside was painted in shades of orange and pink. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, one day, they'll see. One day, they'll understand. She looked at her tired hands, cracked from work, covered in flour, but strong. She smiled softly. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. And somewhere deep inside, beyond all the doubt and exhaustion, a small voice whispered, "Keep going, Claire. Just keep going." The morning sun was soft and warm as it shone through the bakery windows. The storm of the past weeks had finally passed, and the air smelled fresh again. Claire stood by the counter, rolling dough with slow, steady hands. Her oven was still weak, but she had learned how to make it work. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. She had almost gotten used to the quiet days, a few customers here and there, some kind words, and long stretches of silence in between. But that morning, something different happened. The bell above the door rang, and a woman Claire had never seen before walked in. She was in her early 30s, with short blonde hair and a camera hanging around her neck. Her smile was bright, and her eyes looked curious. "Good morning," Claire greeted her. "Good morning," the woman said cheerfully. "This place smells amazing. I was just walking by and couldn't resist coming in." Claire smiled politely. "Thank you. Everything here is baked fresh this morning." The woman looked around the small shop with interest. She took a picture of the bread on the shelves and another of the cookies by the counter. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I write for a small food blog. I love finding local places like this, places with heart." Claire blinked, surprised. "Oh, really? I didn't know people wrote about small bakeries like mine." The woman laughed softly. "Of course they do. People love real stories, and this place feels like one." She ordered a slice of cinnamon loaf and a cup of coffee. As she ate, she chatted easily, asking about the bakery, how long it had been open, and how Claire started it. Claire told her everything, how she quit her office job, how she rented the little shop, and how she tried to keep it alive one loaf at a time. The woman listened closely, nodding, her eyes soft with understanding. "This bread is incredible," she said finally. "I'm going to write about this place tonight. People need to know about it." Claire smiled shyly. "Thank you. That's very kind of you." When the woman left, Claire didn't think much of it. She had met kind people before, but nothing ever really changed. She wiped the counter clean, refilled the jars, and went on with her day. But the next morning, everything felt different. She woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing again and again. At first, she thought it was a mistake, but when she checked, she saw dozens of messages and notifications. People were sharing photos of her bakery online. The woman, whose name she learned was Lucy, had written an article called "The Hidden Gem on Maple Street, a bakery that feeds the heart." The post had gone viral in their small town. Everyone was talking about it. Lucy had shared pictures of Claire's bread, cupcakes, and the cozy yellow walls. She had written about Claire's story, how she started from nothing, how she worked alone, and how every pastry was made with love. By the time Claire opened the bakery that morning, there was already a small line outside. Her heart raced as she unlocked the door. People smiled as they stepped in, holding their phones and pointing at the photos. "Are you Claire?" one woman asked. "We read about you online." "Yes," Claire said, still a little stunned. "Well, we came to try your famous cinnamon loaf." Claire laughed softly, her hands trembling with excitement. She hurried behind the counter, serving bread and pastries as quickly as she could. The smell of fresh coffee and sugar filled the air, and the shop buzzed with life like never before. For the first time in months, every table was full. By noon, everything was sold out. The shelves were empty, the air was warm and sweet, and Claire felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Real pride. She leaned against the counter and smiled, unable to stop the tears that filled her eyes. That evening, after closing the shop, she sat on the same sidewalk where she once cried. But this time, she wasn't broken. She watched people walking by, carrying little boxes with her bakery's name on them, laughing and talking about the bread. Her heart felt light. When she finally checked her phone, there was a message from Ethan. "I saw something online about your bakery," he wrote. "Looks like you're doing well. I'm proud of you, Claire." She stared at the screen for a long moment, her lips curving into a soft smile. It wasn't an apology, but it was something, a small bridge between them. She typed back, "Thanks, Ethan. It means a lot." Then she put her phone away and looked up at the night sky. For once, she didn't feel afraid of tomorrow. Maybe this was only the beginning. Maybe, after everything, the world was finally starting to notice what she had been building all along. She closed her eyes and whispered quietly, "Thank you, life. Thank you for giving me one more chance." The streetlights glowed softly, the air smelled of warm bread, and inside the little bakery on Maple Street, hope had finally found its way home. The next few weeks felt like a dream. Every morning, the bakery was full before the sun was high. The line stretched outside the door, and the smell of bread floated down the street. Claire could hardly believe it. The same shop that once sat empty now buzzed with laughter and chatter. She worked harder than ever. Her hands were always moving, mixing, kneading, baking, smiling. Sometimes she forgot to eat, sometimes she forgot to rest, but she didn't care. For the first time in her life, she felt like all the pain and struggle had finally meant something. One morning, while she was restocking the counter, the phone rang. She wiped her hands on her apron and answered it quickly. "Hello, Claire's Corner Bakery," she said, out of breath. "Hi, this is Adam from Morning Crust Cafe," a cheerful voice replied. "We recently opened a few branches across the state, and we'd love to feature some of your products. Your cinnamon loaf has become quite the talk online." Claire froze for a second. "You mean, you want to buy from me?" "Yes," he said. "We'd like to partner with you. You bake, we handle distribution. You'd reach a much larger audience." For a moment, Claire didn't know what to say. She had dreamed of this kind of opportunity but never thought it would actually happen. "That sounds wonderful," she finally said. "Can we meet to discuss details?" "Of course," Adam replied. "I'll come by tomorrow morning." After she hung up, Claire stood still for a long moment, her heart racing. She looked around her little bakery, the cracked counter, the faded paint, the old oven that had nearly died weeks ago. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And now, someone else saw its worth too. That night, she could barely sleep. Her mind was full of thoughts and plans. What if this was her chance to finally grow? What if this was the moment everything changed? She smiled in the dark, feeling that quiet excitement that only comes when dreams begin to feel real. The next morning, Adam arrived early. He was friendly and warm, with a calm confidence that made Claire feel at ease. He tasted her bread, complimented her recipes, and took notes as she explained her process. "You have something special here," he said sincerely. "People can feel your heart in every bite." "That's rare." Claire blushed a little. "Thank you. I just wanted to make something that made people happy." "Well, you've done that," he said with a smile. "Let's make sure more people get to taste it." They talked for hours, finalizing details. He offered her a small contract to start, just a few batches a week, and promised to increase orders if it went well. It was fair and honest. Claire felt safe agreeing. When Adam left, she sat by the counter with the signed papers in her hands. She felt tears in her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. For so long she had doubted herself. For so long she had felt small and unseen. Now, she was finally moving forward. Over the next month, the bakery grew busier than ever. She hired 2 helpers, a young college student named Mia and a quiet man named Ron who had worked in kitchens before. They quickly became like family. They laughed, they worked, and they believed in the bakery just like she did. The days were long but happy. Claire's oven never rested, the shelves were always full, and the smell of fresh bread filled every corner. Customers would wave to her from the street. Even the nearby shops began to benefit from the crowd she drew in. The little corner on Maple Street was alive again. One evening, when she finally locked up, she looked at the bakery sign glowing softly in the dark. It felt different now, brighter, prouder, stronger. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air against her skin. When she reached her apartment, she found a message from Ethan waiting for her. "Claire, I saw the article in the newspaper about your partnership. That's amazing. You really did it." She smiled at the screen for a long moment. She remembered his words from before, "Stop pretending to be successful." They no longer hurt. Now, they felt like part of the journey. If anything, they had fueled her fire. She typed a simple reply, "Thanks, Ethan. It's just the beginning." Later, as she sat by the window with a cup of tea, she looked out at the quiet town. She thought about the woman she used to be, the one who cried over broken ovens and empty shelves. That woman had not failed. She had survived. Now, she wasn't pretending anymore. She was living it. And for the first time in years, Claire allowed herself to dream bigger, beyond her street, beyond her little shop, beyond what anyone had ever believed she could be. Somewhere deep inside, she whispered a silent promise, "No matter what happens next, I'll keep going. I'll keep believing. Because this time, I know I'm enough." The town's annual harvest fair arrived with bright banners, laughter, and the smell of roasted corn in the air. Every year, it drew people from nearby towns, and this time, Claire had been invited to set up a booth for her bakery. It felt like a big step, a chance to show everyone what her little shop had become. The morning of the fair, she woke before dawn. The sky was still dark, but she could feel her heart racing with excitement. She packed trays of warm bread, pies, and cinnamon rolls into her small delivery van. Mia and Ron arrived early to help, cheerful even though it was cold outside. "Big day, huh?" Mia said, rubbing her hands. "The biggest so far," Claire replied with a nervous laugh. By the time the sun rose, the fairgrounds were buzzing with life. Families wandered through stalls, children ran around with balloons, and music played in the distance. Claire's booth was near the center, simple but beautiful, decorated with light wooden shelves, sunflowers, and her bakery's name written in soft golden letters, Claire's Corner Bakery. Soon, people began to gather. The smell of her pastries spread through the fair like a sweet invitation. Within an hour, her booth was crowded. Some visitors recognized her from the bakery, others were new faces drawn by the scent and the smiles. "This is delicious," one woman said after biting into a loaf of honey bread. "You made this yourself?" Yes, Claire said, blushing. It's one of my favorite recipes. The woman nodded and bought 2 more. As the morning passed, her trays began to empty faster than she could refill them. She laughed as she worked, moving between customers, her apron dusted with flour, her hair tied back loosely. It was tiring, but she felt alive, truly alive. Then, in the middle of the crowd, she noticed a familiar face. Ethan. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking both surprised and unsure. He hadn't seen her since that last message. For a moment, Claire's heart skipped. She didn't know whether to wave or pretend she hadn't noticed. But Ethan smiled slightly, and that broke the tension. He walked over. You've really built something, he said, his eyes moving over the booth, the customers, the little jars of jam and golden loaves. This is incredible, Claire. Thank you, she said softly, not sure what else to say. I remember when you first told me about your dream, he continued. I didn't understand back then. I thought you were chasing something impossible. But I was wrong. Claire smiled gently. It's okay. I think I needed to hear those words, even if they hurt. They pushed me. Ethan nodded slowly, looking down. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just didn't believe in things I couldn't see. But you did. There was silence between them for a moment, the kind of silence that holds memories, apologies, and unspoken respect. Then a small girl tugged at Claire's apron. Excuse me, miss, she said shyly, my mom says your apple pie is the best. Can I get one? Claire smiled warmly and handed the girl a slice. Of course, sweetie. The girl grinned and ran back to her mother. Ethan watched the scene quietly. You make people happy, he said. You always did. Claire looked at him, then at the crowd gathered around her booth. I guess that's all I ever wanted. For the rest of the day, Claire stayed busy. Ethan lingered nearby for a while, helping her carry boxes when things got hectic. They talked between customers, about old times, about mistakes, about how life sometimes takes strange turns before leading you where you're meant to be. By evening, her booth was nearly empty. Every loaf, every pie, every cookie had been sold. When the fair organizers came to announce the awards, Claire wasn't expecting anything. She was just proud of what she'd done. But when they called her name, Best Local Business Display, Claire's Corner Bakery. She stood frozen for a moment. The crowd clapped and cheered. Mia screamed with excitement, and Ron gave a proud smile. Claire stepped forward to accept the ribbon, her hands trembling. As she looked at the crowd, she spotted Ethan again. He was clapping, really clapping, his eyes shining with pride. She smiled back, feeling tears in her eyes. That night, after the fair ended, Claire walked to her van under the quiet stars. The ribbon hung gently around her neck. Ethan followed her to help pack up the last few boxes. You did it, he said softly. No, Claire said with a small laugh, I'm just getting started. He smiled. You've changed. Maybe, she said, looking up at the sky. Or maybe I just finally became who I was meant to be. They stood there for a while, surrounded by the soft hum of the fairgrounds closing down. For Claire, the night didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning, one she had earned with every tear, every risk, every lonely morning in the bakery. As she drove home later, the fair ribbon beside her on the seat, she whispered to herself, I wasn't pretending. I was preparing. Months passed after the harvest fair, and Claire's Corner Bakery had become more than just a small-town shop. People drove from nearby cities just to taste her bread and pies. The partnership with Morning Crust Cafe had expanded, and now her products were sold in several branches across the state. For the first time in years, Claire felt financially secure. The bakery's shelves were always full, her employees were happy, and her days were busy in the best possible way. But with that success came new challenges, ones she had never expected. Every day brought new demands. Bigger orders, new paperwork, phone calls, and suppliers who wanted to work with her. Sometimes she missed the quiet mornings when it was just her, an old oven, and the smell of fresh dough. Success was beautiful, but it was heavy too. One evening, after closing, she sat by the counter with a tired sigh. Mia came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "You okay, Claire?" she asked gently.
"Yeah,"
Claire said, smiling faintly. "Just tired. I think I've been chasing deadlines instead of dreams lately." Mia smiled. "That's what happens when dreams start coming true. They get busier." Claire laughed softly. "You might be right." Later that night, she stayed back to finish an order. The bakery was quiet again, the way it used to be. She rolled the dough carefully, remembering the early days when she doubted if she would even make rent. Now, she was supplying to stores she once only dreamed of visiting. But despite everything, a part of her felt a little lost. She had worked so hard to prove herself, to Ethan, to the town, to the world, and now that she wasn't sure what came next. A few days later, she received an invitation in the mail. It was from the state's Business Association, an award ceremony for inspirational entrepreneurs. Her bakery had been nominated. Claire stared at the letter for a long moment. She couldn't help but smile, but fear crept in too. She had never been the kind of woman who stood on a stage. She was used to ovens, not microphones. That evening, she called Ethan. "Hey," she said when he answered. "Guess what? I got nominated for a state award." "That's incredible," Ethan said warmly. "See? The world finally sees what I always should have seen." Claire laughed. "I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of attention." "You are," he said firmly. "You earned it." The day of the ceremony arrived quickly. Claire wore a simple navy blue dress and tied her hair back neatly. She looked into the mirror and barely recognized herself, confident, calm, and no longer afraid. When she arrived at the hall, there were cameras, lights, and dozens of business owners in suits. It was intimidating, but she reminded herself of who she was, the girl who once cried over a broken oven and still got back up to bake the next morning. When her name was called, she walked to the stage with steady steps. The applause echoed around her, and for a moment, she saw flashes of every version of herself, the struggling one, the hopeful one, the tired one, the strong one. She stood at the podium, her heart pounding. The microphone waited. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "I started with almost nothing," she said, her voice clear. "Just an old oven, a few recipes, and a belief that maybe, one day, people would smile because of something I made. I failed many times. I cried a lot. But I kept going. Because I realized, success isn't about looking successful. It's about not giving up when no one's watching." The hall was silent for a moment. Then came soft applause that grew louder and louder. Claire smiled, tears in her eyes. After the event, reporters asked for interviews, and people congratulated her. Ethan sent her a text, "You were amazing. I'm proud of you." That night, she returned home to her small apartment. She placed the award on her kitchen shelf, right next to an old, chipped mug she had used back when she could barely afford flour. The contrast made her smile. She sat down by the window, watching the city lights. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Mia, "We sold out today again. And a local paper wants to write about you." Claire replied with a simple heart emoji. Then she leaned back, letting the quiet fill the room. She wasn't pretending anymore. She wasn't chasing approval or trying to prove someone wrong. Now, she was simply living the life she had built, one loaf, one risk, one brave step at a time. And deep inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more work, maybe even more pressure. But she knew she could handle it. Because she had already faced the hardest part, believing in herself when no one else did. She smiled softly to herself and whispered, "I did it, Dad. I really did it." Outside, the city glowed, a quiet witness to her journey from broken dreams to bright beginnings. And for Claire, it wasn't just success. It was freedom. A year had passed since Claire won the Inspirational Entrepreneur Award. Her bakery had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. There were now 2 branches, one in her hometown and another in the nearby city. Both were full every morning, filled with the smell of fresh bread and the sound of laughter. But what made Claire happiest wasn't the money or the attention. It was seeing people smile when they took a bite of something she made. It was hearing a young worker say, "I love it here, Claire. This place feels like family." Success had changed her life, but she never let it change her heart. She still came early every morning, still tied her apron, and still touched the same cracked countertop that had been there since the beginning. To her, it was a reminder that all great things start small. One rainy afternoon, while checking inventory, she noticed a girl standing outside the bakery window. The girl looked about 19, soaked from the rain, her eyes tired and uncertain. Claire went to the door and called out gently, "Come inside, sweetheart. You'll catch a cold out there." The girl hesitated, then slowly walked in. "I'm sorry," she said shyly. "I was just looking. Everything smells so good." Claire smiled warmly. "Would you like a muffin? It's on the house." The girl's eyes widened. "Really?" "Of course," Claire said, handing her a warm blueberry muffin. "Sit down, dry off." As the girl ate, Claire sat with her. "What's your name?" she asked. "Lena," the girl said softly. I'm new in town. Been trying to find a job, but it's been hard. No one's hiring." Claire nodded slowly. She remembered that feeling, being young, lost, and uncertain. "Do you have any experience working in a bakery?" Lena shook her head. "No, but I can learn. I just need someone to give me a chance." Claire smiled. "You're looking at someone who once said those same words." Lena blinked in surprise. "You?" "Oh yes," Claire said with a laugh. "When I started, people didn't believe in me. But I believed enough for all of them." Lena listened, eyes shining. "And now you own all this?" Claire nodded gently. "Yes. But it wasn't easy. I started with nothing, just a few dollars, a dream, and a whole lot of tears." They talked for a while longer, and before leaving, Lena asked softly, "If you ever need help, even cleaning tables, I'd love to work here." Claire looked at her for a moment, then said, "Come tomorrow morning. We'll see what you can do." The girl's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you, Claire. Really. I won't let you down." After she left, Claire stood by the window, watching her disappear into the rain. A quiet smile formed on her lips. She remembered the day years ago when someone had told her she was just pretending to be successful. She had cried that day, broken and small. But now, she realized something, that pain had made her stronger. The next morning, Lena showed up early, nervous but eager. Claire handed her an apron and taught her how to knead dough. It reminded her of her first days, awkward, uncertain, but full of hope. As the dough rose in the oven, Lena giggled in surprise. "It's like magic." Claire smiled. "It's not magic. It's patience. Just like life." Weeks passed, and Lena became part of the bakery family. She worked hard, always smiling, always learning. Watching her, Claire felt a deep sense of pride, not just for her business, but for the woman she had become. One evening, after closing, Claire sat alone by the counter with a cup of tea. The bakery was quiet, lit by the soft glow of the lamps. She looked around, the shelves full, the air warm, the sign outside shining gently. Her heart was full. She had lost, struggled, cried, and doubted. But she had also grown, built, and healed. Her success wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about becoming the kind of person who could lift others up, the way no one had done for her back then. She took out her old journal and flipped to a page where she had once written, "One day, they'll see I wasn't pretending." She smiled softly and added a new line under it, "Now, I help others see they don't have to pretend either." Outside, the rain had stopped, and the world smelled fresh and new. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and whispered to herself as she stepped into the night, "I made it. And now it's someone else's turn." As she walked home, her reflection in the bakery window lingered for a moment, a woman who had once been doubted, now standing tall, calm, and sure of her worth. She wasn't pretending to be successful. She was living proof that success begins the moment you refuse to give up.